Kirby is often considered to be one of the most difficult games of all time. Nintendo has even unofficially gone on record saying that Kirby is intended for hardcore gamers only, for people who truly want to test their skill. I remember thinking back when the first game was released in 1992, 4 years before I was born, that it was almost like Nintendo was calling me out, daring me to test my luck against their most challenging of games. Can you beat Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland without any copy abilities? Up first is level 1, who would have guessed that? This being the first level, things are off to an easy start. The first time I sucked a fireman, I accidentally hit down and absorbed his soul. That was the first of many resets. For the sake of honesty, I'll tell you that I was playing this on an emulator. Nightmare in Dreamland does have a way to reset the game. Press A, B, Start, and Select, and you'll be returned to the main menu. I didn't want to do that every single time I became a god by mistake. Instead, I made a quick save in the overworld and went back to before I started the level rather than restarting the game. The effect is the same, it just saves me some time. Then, I had an idea. A better idea than the time I thought to make nachos after having multiple shots and ended up setting off my smoke alarm. The solution to that problem was to shut off all power in my apartment and manually disable the smoke detector by removing the battery and unplugging it. The guys who found that during an apartment inspection were not happy that I had rendered 33% of my smoke detectors inert. I ran a poll on Twitter asking if it would be better to do a no copy abilities run or a no damage run. That poll was a ruse. The second I posted it, I knew exactly what I was doing. Grab a juice box and put on your nicest pair of jorts. The real title of this video is Can You Beat Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland without any copy abilities and without taking any damage? That's right, I'm doing them both at the same time. I went back to the very beginning, to the dark times of the long ago, to the first level of the game, and began my journey again. Level 1-1 is about as easy as it was the last time. This is, after all, still a Kirby game. If you're wondering about the rules, damage is damage, and enemies can be eaten as long as they don't give me any sort of ability. If I take damage of any kind, I hit the quick load button and go back to the overworld to try the level again. Also, fun fact, I never once got to the top of that post-level minigame. Level 1-2 introduces us to the invincible spiked balls, World War II era anti-air guns, and it had the first mini-boss fight. There are many throughout the game, but most follow the same sort of pattern. Level 1-3 is more of the same, has some new enemies and abilities to play with, and the first underwater portion of the game. 1-4 cranks it up a notch with a ladder and a walrus, I think. These areas with enemies swooping in prove to be a significant challenge later in the game. Then there's the first real boss, and this one took me a bit to get through. Probably didn't help that I was several shots into my Saturday afternoon by that point. The issue is the apples falling from the sky like acid rain. They always spawn above you, which makes it somewhat tricky to inhale one of them and shoot it at the tree while also dodging the others that are still falling. But like most areas that presented any sort of a challenge, things get easier the more you do it. You learn the patterns, figure things out, and can get through it with relative ease. I would go so far as to say that my last attempt was my best one. 6 apples fell, and not one was wasted. Next up is World 2, Ice Cream Land. It's called Level 2, but I don't care, I'm calling it a world. In 2-1, I learned that after falling for enough time, you can land on a star block or an enemy and destroy it. Scarfy shows up here with those weird ears. They get pissed and become suicidal when you try to eat them. Then there are the sentient bombs that exist only to die in a violent explosion, causing great harm to anything nearby. Stay far enough away and they're not a threat. 2-2 supplies a few copy abilities before battling the wheel from the classic 2010 film Rubber. You're supposed to absorb the wheel and wheelie your way through the level. I'm sure that would have been fun. My imaginary therapist advised me to avoid fun, so I just killed anything that came near me by blasting them into oblivion instead of running them over with my body. Death is death, how they get there doesn't matter. 2-3 took a couple tries. Most levels have many parts or stages to them. This was the level with the most stages so far. It also had a fight with Meta Knight's companions. There's nothing inherently hard about it, just move carefully and with purpose. Pay attention to when projectiles are being thrown, and you'll get through it. In 2-4, I got an extra life that meant nothing and fought an alarm clock. 2-5 was a bit of a pain. The alcohol was causing some issues, I got greedy with my movement, and the section with all the blocks was annoying. The falling bombs are waiting for you at the top. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they'll detonate all over you. My self-confidence is into the negatives. I'm more than comfortable with admitting that I was on this level for more than 10 minutes. The secret is to never give the bombs the opportunity to fall to their glorious demise in the first place. World 2's boss is the paint roller. Once you realize what you need to do, this becomes a cakewalk. Suck the basketball or the umbrella or the cloud or whatever he throws at you, shoot it back at him, hover at the top of the stage, then he explodes into nothing. World 3 is the butter building. I tell you that a lot of the levels take place indoors, but it really makes no difference whatsoever. 3-1 is a fairly standard level, nothing crazy. 3-2 has you ascending a tower. Watch out for falling bricks and the caterpillars. There are some areas of the game you physically can't reach because you have no way of destroying the stuff blocking your way. I remembered the beetle being one of the harder mini-bosses. He's really not. Maybe a little more time consuming, if that. 3-3 had lots of doors to go through. It's probably the closest any level of this game came to being a puzzle. It took less than a minute to beat this one. 3-4 contained another Meta Knight fight. It was far more open than the last one. Towards the end, you're floating up an indoor skydiving tube. Spikes and turrets exist and should be avoided. The gimmick of 3-5 is that you're given an invincibility power to run through a bunch of God's little mistakes. Beat the monkey with your suction and you're done. 3-6 had a bunch of those terrorist bombs in the first area, which kinda forces you to go slower than you'd like while you wait for them to kill themselves. This was another one of those levels that took far longer than it had any right to, mostly because bricks kept falling from the sky and caving in my skull. The butter building boss was a twofer. Both the sun and moon came out to play. I spent a solid 20 minutes in this fight. Looking back, I'm not sure why. I'm not seeing anything that should have been difficult. The only thing I can think of is that the object in the sky will sometimes shine down a light, and I kept underestimating how close I could be without taking damage. Or they sometimes do attacks where they fling themselves or something towards you at supersonic speeds, and I waited too long to dodge them. Eventually, they both fell before me, and I was on to World 4, Grape Garden. As always, the first stage of a new world is nothing complicated. The UFOs can fly towards you pretty quick, so you gotta be ready to not get hit by them and turned into jelly. Same goes for the bouncy balls, and the tornadoes. 2-4 was another lengthy one. Quite a few areas to get through, some rather large that are time consuming to get through. And it culminates in a 2-on-1 mini-boss battle. Something else I noticed in these sorts of levels where I took damage a lot, I would get overconfident and try to fly through them like I was doing a speedrun or something. More often than not, that would lead to more failures than successes. 4-3 was nothing noteworthy. I realized after I took damage in 4-4 that I hadn't saved after beating 4-3, so I had to do it again, and of course I took damage more times trying to beat it the second time than I did the first. 4-4 had a lot of enemies in it, birds and shit. I accidentally got a copy ability, way to go me, had many different failures right at the start of this mission. Checkpoint confidence is a very real problem. 4-5 marked the return of Meta Knight and his gang of felons, as well as some pretty hazardous landscapes to navigate. I started noticing a pattern with the 6th level of each world. They all seemed to give me trouble. Once I became self-aware for the first time in my life and stopped trying to impress all the nobody who was watching me, I got through it. World 4's boss is Krakow, the cycloptic storm cloud, and I hate him. The reason for this disdain is that it takes at least 40 seconds for the battle to actually begin. It can be done faster if you have the high jump ability that the game practically gives you for free. I, obviously, can't do that. Every time I fail, it takes nearly a minute to try again. Not to mention the fact that with the high jump ability, you really don't need to worry about being damaged by Krakow. I'm slow, both mentally and physically, so it's a problem I must deal with. As for the fight itself, the high jump is supposed to be used to attack the iCloud. Because of how high it sits above the ground, your openings to attack are infrequent. That said, the fight is absolutely manageable. Pretend all the bitching I just did didn't happen. World 5 is the Yogurt Yard. There's a theme to these worlds. I think you can figure out what it is. It's construction themed. 5-1 was a fun level. It was the perfect mix of speed and skill, and it was the closest this game comes to having the Dolphin Dive Soda from Black Ops. Flopper is the best perk. Anyone who disagrees with me should be castrated. 5-2 was a level that seemed to go on forever. Every time you went through a door, there was more level to get through. 5-3 required a good amount of careful floating, so Pink Guy doesn't bung his noggin. The strategy of sucking an enemy into your mouth and falling into the void seems to work well in Smash Bros, but doesn't work so well here. The spikes gave me a sneak peek at the pain to come, then that pain arrived in 5-4. The thing is, I'm not great at platforming that requires any sort of precision. The last 2D platformer I played was New Super Mario Bros. 2, and that was even more of a baby game than this. I couldn't tell you how many times I fucked up getting past this spike section. After that comes, I think, the 4th tussle with Meta Knight's muscle. Then some basic enemy evasion, then more spikes, this time underwater, alongside the spiked balls and water that is constantly pushing you to the left. Then, fall down this waterfall while not being hit by any of the enemies. On their own, none of these sections are that bad. For someone who isn't me, they probably aren't even a challenge at all. But this level took me about 20 minutes. 5-5 had the first fight with Ninetales' autistic cousin, slightly more difficult than the Clock or the Hammer Gorillas or any of the other mini-bosses. You can always count on hiding at the top of the level to save your ass. 5-6, not even worth talking about. Easy. World 5's boss is the Heavy Mole. I like his name. I like this boss battle too. It wasn't anything stupid. Occasionally, you'll have to put your back into it to not fall off screen, because this is an auto-scroller. For that reason, it took a little while, but it was probably the easiest boss in the game. Next is World 6. Orange Ocean. Kirby is automatically given a snorkel when he's in the water, to make up for not being able to suck or float. If you think about it, he could probably just suck up all the water into the infinite nothing where his heart used to be. Speaking of water, dealing with this stupid fucking elephant in the water was so frustrating. Then I found out that there was more level past the door I entered, and I didn't even have to fight him at all. Watch out for the pelicans and piranhas, and 6-1 is now a fever dream you'll never have to remember. 6-2 had its fair share of trouble spots. It was one of those levels with more areas than most. It probably took me about 10 attempts to get through it. 6-3 took place on a boat, so it's automatically in the bottom 5 levels of this game. The ceiling height was higher than normal during the Hammer guy's fight. I found that incredibly off-putting. It bothered me quite a bit. He died, I killed his puppet overlords, played on the sails, and 6-4 happened. What can I even say about this one? I need to choose my words carefully. Fuck this level. The first few screens, I made them all my bitches after I learned the layout. Then you're given an umbrella because there's a lengthy vertical area you need to get through that's filled with explosive coconuts that fall with the intention of ending your life. This was bad. Just getting to this point, despite what I just said, took a bit of effort. Not a lot, but some. I spent so much time on this little slice of hell. Without the umbrella, you've got to be inconceivably careful with your movement. Like, by the time one of the coconuts starts falling, you need to already be moving out of the way. Psychic abilities would really come in handy here. After slamming my face against those coconuts for 25-30 minutes with no perceivable strategy other than fuck those coconuts, I had a moment of clarity. I could use the trees to my advantage like they did back in the Vietnam War. Learn where I need to be. Of course, it was much simpler than I was making it. Basically just stick to the right, dodge a single coconut, and you're done. 6-5 was like taking candy from a baby that died from the flu 100 years ago, compared to the last level. 6-6 is commonly thought by Kirby lore experts to be the level that bridges the gap between Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. The multiple UFOs made me question my own mortality, wondering if the emptiness of death could be better than what I'm experiencing now. Short version is I was again full of myself after 6-4 and kept making mistakes. It was also the last level of World 6, so it had some girth to it. The boss battle of World 6 was certainly something. It was where things started falling apart. The reason is simple. You can't start the fight without acquiring the sword ability. Normally, the select button would let you spit out the ability. I briefly hoped I could gain the ability then remove it, but you can't. I decided long ago that if a game requires you to do something, it doesn't count, but I don't have to like it. On a technical level, you can't beat Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland without using any copy abilities. As for the fight itself, Meta Knight is tougher than any of the other bosses because he has more health, and he's also more nimble. As is tradition, the last time I faced him, I pushed in his shit so hard it came out his ears. I legit killed him in less than 10 seconds. Then came World 7, Rainbow Resort. I vomited out that sword nonsense and entered 7-1. This block section made me mad. Not because it was like difficult or anything, it wasn't. It just bothered me that it existed in the first place. 7-2 was the obligatory boss tower level where you fight through 7 different mini-bosses. I got real lucky with this one and got through them all without taking damage once. Getting to the last one and having your cheek ripped open by a flaming lion while you were sneezing would have caused my throat to be coated in Drano when I did a shot of it. 7-3 brought back the slippery surfaces that must exist in every platformer. They were accompanied by flying enemies and Sir Kibble and his merry men. That wasn't some stupid joke. Sir Kibble is the name of the enemies that look like knights and throw boomerangs or whatever the fuck. After the slipper room is an invincibility section, and if you're a gamer god like I am who's great at Kirby, that power-up will get you through the rest of the level, or at least most of it. 7-4 was nuts. The idea is dead easy. It's a bunch of rooms where you kill 4 of the same type of enemy. World 7 is all about the gimmicks. I got through it just fine the first time. I messed up a jump, probably because I never had the makings of a varsity athlete, and spent the next 15 minutes trying to get back through this level. 7-5 forced me to go slow. Those bombers were back. There's a wheel fight in an enclosed space. The gimmick here is the fastest mini-boss in the smallest possible area. The rest of the level is easy. 7-6 is a joke. You're just going through a bunch of different areas from the original Kirby game in black and white. There's no reason to take damage here. That was it. The last level was finished. All that was left to do was murder the High King of Skyrim and claim the crown for myself. Before I even talk about the fight itself, let me tell you this, it took me 35 minutes to beat him without taking damage. You'll understand why I told you that in a bit. The biggest problem I faced in this fight was getting pinned against the wall with nowhere to go. Then His Majesty fucks me with his mallet. His inflation attack can be dodged easily. The suction can be avoided easily. The hammer and his ass slam are the problem children of his arsenal. That and time. Time wasn't on my side. The longer the fight, the more likely it is that I'll make a stupid mistake and take damage. There were more than a few times where he was one hit away from death, and I just threw it away. Another issue is one that comes directly from the challenge run. The only time I can do damage is when he does one of his attacks that leaves a little star on the ground. In fact, I'd call that the biggest hindrance of this climactic battle for the fate of Dreamland. But finally, after 35 minutes, the king lay dead at my feet. He had enough life left in him to beg me not to do what I was about to do. Never one to trust a dying man, I did it anyway. I don't make mistakes. I fully planned on unleashing the ultimate evil of the Kirby universe on Dreamland. I then had to fight the nightmare with the Star Rod. Same as the Meta Knight fight, I had no option to not use it. This time I even spawned with it. I took damage, then let him kill me because it didn't matter. I knew for a fact I wouldn't have to fight King DDD again. I remembered how this game went when I played it as a children. There's the orb monster, then the tornado guy. I took some damage, then let myself die because it didn't matter all that much. I was in awe of what I just witnessed. This is a level of disappointment I've only experienced a handful of times since I started doing these challenge videos. Not only did I have to fight King DDD again, which in and of itself would have been annoying, as he's the toughest boss I've encountered so far, I had to beat him without taking any damage. Then, the corrupted Pokeball without taking any damage. Then, the true final boss without taking any damage. I wasn't sure how to process it. It was like that scene from Contagion, where the Martian is told his wife is dead, and he asks if he can talk to her. He couldn't comprehend the information he just received. That's how I felt. I stopped playing for the night. I just spent an amount of time I'd rather not say playing Kirby. I had to clear my head and think about how to proceed. After thinking, I remembered that if you die during the fight with Nightmare, you start back at the beginning of the fight. So my options were to give myself 3 chances at the bad dream, because that's how many lives I had. Then, if I fail, I fight DDD again, back to square one basically. Or, because the video title only mentions copy abilities, I deem myself a failure and quit the no damage run. I think you know which one I did. Fuck the no damage run. And because the Star Rod ability is automatically given, fuck the no copy ability run too. Back in the air, the disco ball didn't kill me, at least not directly. The battle consisted of holding down the B button and avoiding projectiles. I killed him, then I got crushed by the screen. He had no health. I don't know what I just saw happen. The second time he got, and I rode to the moon. The living nightmare, Chucky Finster himself, is here to destroy imagination as we know it. I remembered this being a bullshit boss when I was a youth. I started off with 1 health and obviously failed miserably. I won't lie, I made a quick save right when this battle started. I felt like I'd earned it. But even with that, even knowing that I was almost done, this was the most maddening fight of the game. Mostly because I felt like his attacks were bullshit, and me not hitting him was bullshit, and him being invulnerable most of the time was bullshit. Sooner or later, I began to evolve. My movements became more precise. My ability to avoid attacks became godly. I gave the game my undivided attention. No Discord, no music, just playing Kirby the way Todd Howard wanted it to be played. With a single health left, I delivered the final blow. The nightmare blew up the moon. Cookie Monster's gonna be pissed about that. And I did not beat Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland without any copy abilities or without taking any damage. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything, leave a like. Leave a dislike if you didn't enjoy the video or didn't learn anything. Join the Mitten Squad Discord server through a link in the video description. Thanks to the Champion tier supporters as well as other channel members for helping make videos like this one possible. Follow me on Twitter at Mitten Squad. My name is Paul of Mitten Squad. Have a wonderful day.